Hello and welcome to Life is a Scale Model. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out a bunch and it allows us to bring you more great videos about building models. Today we're going to finish up our motion picture Refit Enterprise, and boy do we have a lot to unpack. As you can see from this instruction pamphlet, I had to do some marking. That's because there are decals on the decal sheet that aren't on the instructions, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Before we start laying down decals, we're going to put a coat of gloss coat on our model. This is going to give the model a nice, smooth, even surface that we can put the decals on, and it's going to help the decals slide around a little bit easier than if we just started putting the decals on the bare paint. This step definitely will help you to get a nicer fitment to your decals as you put them on. So, as has become tradition here on Life as a Scale Model, we're going to start on the ventral side of the ship, and we're going to do the thing that's at the very center of the saucer, which in this case for the Motion Picture Enterprise is, I am assuming, a sensor pod area, somewhere where people who use the sensors look at the data and crunch the numbers and things like that. I don't know. It's a nice little thing that goes around our sensor dome. And I use that word around very deliberately. We're going to come back to that because, well, you'll see. So I put my decal in the water to let it soak and to break it away from the backing paper. And standard operating procedure, at least here on this channel, is to hit the model with a little micro set. And this is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to wet the surface of the model so we can move the decal around a bit. And two, it's going to help that decal to soften and adhere to the contours of the model itself. And so now I've got the decal on the model. I'm going to go ahead with my tweezers here, since it's kind of small. I'm just going to try to put it in place where I want it to sit. And now we're going to play a bit of a game called How Long Do I Fiddle with the Decal Before I Realize That Something Is Amiss? As you can see, I'm trying to get back and forth between the four corners of the decal here, and things just aren't sitting the way that I would like them to sit. I get one area flat and it pulls another area up, and I get that other area flat and it pulls another area up. And then it dawned on me that this is a decal that's meant to go around the sensor dome. And there wasn't a hole there for it to go around the sensor dome. So we're going to take it off and we're going to modify it and we're going to try it again.
Great googly moogly.
More on that later. Now we're just going to jump in the deep end of the pool with our little arm floaties and our life vest. We're going to tackle the first bit of the saucer decals. These decals are big. And in hindsight, I really probably should have done what I did in the reverse order. But being as part of the reasoning behind making these videos is to teach you, the audience, a little bit about model building, my goofs are just added benefits and information for you guys to take with you into your model building process. That said, when we get to the top of the saucer, we will definitely cut that decal down into smaller portions. But this one, which is the one I should have cut into smaller wedges. This is the one I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. Let my acts of poor judgment be your word of warning. Don't try to take this one on in one piece. This is definitely the one that if I was going to cut it down to size to make it more manageable, that's the one I would cut for sure. So once again, we'll take our brush and we'll get some micro set laid down where we're going to put the decal. I've seen some other videos where the gentlemen have used a spray bottle to spray the surface of the model with the micro set. If you happen to do that, why don't you let me know in the comment section, because it's something that's definitely crossed my mind. I don't feel like I'm getting nearly enough micro set spread around with my current method, or else I will get it spread around, but then it'll pool in places where it's not terribly useful. So yeah, let me know how you feel about the spray bottle method. So here's our monster decal. And honestly, this is going to be the bulk of the video today. Because once you get this decal onto the model, it takes quite a bit of finagling to finally get the thing looking presentable. And in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that we goofed with that first decal, even though it kind of ended up being a portent of things to come. Because if I had already gotten it onto the model, this would be the part where it would have gotten ripped away from wherever it was setting, and I probably would have lost it forever. So things worked out for the best, but this is definitely the model where I start to say, okay, beware the wallpaper decals. They are quite the challenge when it comes to building these models. And for me, it really is kind of a double-edged sword. I appreciate the amount of detail that it is possible to get using these decals. What I do not appreciate quite as much is the tedium and the difficulty curve when it comes to actually applying these decals. There are definitely some decals in this particular kit that were designed without considering physics and how paper and plastic and whatnot work. I think the best way to describe the decals for the Refit Enterprise would be overly ambitious. Round 2 really wanted to make things as simple and painless as possible for the builder, which I have great respect for. But in the process, I think they neglected common sense in some ways, which really makes it more difficult sometimes than it needs to be to do these decals. For example, if this particular decal had just come cut into segments the way I mentioned I should have done it a few minutes ago, then this process would not have been nearly as difficult. But here we are. As you can see, this is a big decal. It kind of has a mind of its own. It just wants to go where it wants to go. I wish I could offer you some kind of a silver bullet solution to making this decal easy to put on. Unfortunately, it doesn't really exist. You'll use lots and lots of micro set, and and make sure you have lots and lots of water or whatever you're using as a lubrication medium on the model itself on the model, so that you can really slide this decal around, because otherwise it's going to get stuck. As you can see, it's done with me, and that's just going to make the whole process that much more difficult. Also, remember our favorite saying here on Life as a Scale Model: perfection is an enemy to progress. Try to refrain and fight the urge to make it look absolutely 100% perfect, because while I won't say it's impossible, it's a difficult task, and and the pursuit could get you out in the weeds or down a rabbit hole, however you want to describe it, for a very long time. So you be the judge. Do what feels best for you. I was going for good enough. With these models, I'm mostly trying to get them to a point where they pass the 3-foot test, which is if you're standing 3 feet away, they look good. So I wasn't too keen on trying to make every little detail look absolutely perfect. Nevertheless, it's still a very long and tedious process. Yes, I work with tweezers. There are going to be some. We're going to tell you that is not a great idea, and I totally agree with them, because under most circumstances, tweezers are going to tear your decals. But with these round 2 decals, they are oftentimes so thick that you can get away with it. And it's been so hot where I live lately that everything liquid just kind of evaporates almost instantly. So I had to be real aggressive with how I was moving this decal around in order to actually be able to move it. You can see I'm going back. I'm dipping my decal brush into water and trying to get more water under the decal just so I can keep it moving, because as I'm working, I can feel everything getting dry from the excessive heat that we've been experiencing lately. And it was at that point that I just said, to heck with it. Let's just drench everything the best we can. And I didn't feel like I'd made too much appreciable progress at that point anyway. So, another cherished saying on Life as a Scale Model: sometimes you got to break it before you can make it. And this is a textbook case of quote unquote breaking it before you make it. Took a couple steps back so I could take a few more steps forward. I believe we'd call that a tactical withdrawal. But we're getting there. You can see the decal is slowly but surely starting to take shape. And if you're patient, you don't let your temper get the better of you, and you just kind of work things from every angle, eventually you can get this decal looking presentable. I promise. You will see at the end of the video that despite all of the fighting and the kicking and the screaming that this model presented, we did finally get this thing looking presentable. And I don't know what it's been about this particular model. This is one that I had been looking forward to since we started the Enterprise series. And the last time I built this model, I don't recall it giving me this much trouble. But between this particular model and the weather we've been experiencing, this whole entire build has been a bit of an anomalous uphill slog. We've had almost nonstop thunderstorms since the beginning of June, it seems like. And now we're experiencing record heat. And yeah, it's been interesting, this particular model. I guess I should take a moment to apologize for missing my normal Friday publication time frame. I did get sick last week, which kind of ground everything to a halt, unfortunately. Happens to the best of us. I try to get sick as little as I possibly can, but it does happen from time to time. So here we are, a few days late, and maybe a few gray hairs more than we were when we started this journey, but we did it. Now you can really see this decal starting to come together. There are definitely some spots where I need to tamp it down with my Q-tip, but it's starting to take shape. Like I said, as long as you're patient and you work careful and slow and don't let your temper get out of control, this is a thing that can be done. So all I'm doing is I'm working from the center almost straight out. Straight out is probably the best way you could do this to get like air and excess water or whatever out from under the decal. But I'm just working real slow, real careful, trying to make sure that my overgrown bombastic hair stays out of the frame today. It's definitely time for the star of the show to go get a haircut, because it's hard enough keeping my hair out of frame when it's not super long. I will say, as I was working this decal, my primary focus was trying to make sure that the ship's registry looked as good as I could get it. In all honesty, when people are looking at starship models, they're going to look at the things that catch their eye most readily, and I figured on this particular area of the model, it was probably going to be the ship registry. Now I'm just trying to work the last of that decal into that corner real tight and snug, so I can go back a bit and get some of the wrinkles out of the areas behind it. And that's really that really presented me with the most successful method of working this decal, was just to kind of work it in such a way that I was pulling slack from one end to flatten it out further behind. And I used the registry as my centerpiece so that I wasn't constantly juggling back and forth, if that makes sense. Just making some fine adjustments there. Now I'll take my Q-tip and I'll try to just smooth everything out against the surface of the model. Try to get all the bubbles and the wrinkles out the best I can. And also try to make sure that I keep my expectations in check, so that I'm not giving myself a hard time. Our hobbies are meant to be fun. Challenging, but fun. And if we're constantly giving ourselves grief over our shortcomings, then we'll probably never have fun. And then what's the point of doing the hobby, right? Just getting the last little bit of those bubbles out. Trying to get that decal to sit just as smooth and tight as I can. Now, another thing to bear in mind when you're doing this particular kind of model is your micro set is going to help the model adhere to the curvatures of the surface a lot better than just water. And then your microsol is going to actually shrink that decal ever so slightly and make it sit that much more tightly against the surface of the model. So if you get done fiddling and it doesn't look great, just remember that your microsol is going to help with that situation. Now I eventually came to a workflow where I would dip my brush in the microsol and then I'd go around the decal and I would try to get air bubbles and stuff out of the decal with the microsol on the tip of the brush. So that way I was, kind of killing two birds with one stone. It worked okay. I think in hindsight, though, this is a decal where I maybe missed the point a little bit. You can see the teal, the bluish teal, by the neck of the saucer, or by the neck of the ship, I should say. I honestly think that the teal might have been intended to go along the front of the neck. I did notice as this model came together a bit more with the decals that whoever designed them intended there to be some overlap. I wish that had been communicated better in the instructions, but looking back on it, I'm kind of thinking that might have been what was going on, because I did notice some gaps in my teal color as I put other decals in other areas of the model on. And it left me scratching my head for a second, and then there was that light bulb moment. Oh, I did not get this decal placed nearly as well as I thought I did. Now, we're going to go back to that part that rings around the sensor dome. And previously I had tried just cutting an X through the negative space to see if I couldn't just get the thing to curl around, but that did not work. So we're going to go in with the hobby knife and we're going to excise the center of this decal, which in my humble opinion should have been cut when the decals are printed in the first place, so that you didn't have to do this sort of thing. Unfortunately, this was not the only offender in this particular area. I would love to head out to Indiana one day and take a little tour of the Round 2 headquarters and say, hey, why aren't you guys doing a better job with your decals? Hire me for quality control. Put me in, coach. I'm ready. But as you can see, I'm not trying to score this decal. I'm actually just pressing the blade through the decal and the backing paper very, very gently and carefully. And in that way, I'm just kind of trying to make a series of small cuts that will allow me to eventually remove the center. And there we go. We got the center removed, and we'll drop the decal and the backing paper into the water once again and finally get this decal ready to be put on. Uh, you can see I put the decal on the bottom of the engineering hull. And speaking of things that didn't have holes punched in them, you are going to have to do that yourself if you happen to get this particular version of the kit that comes out of the 7 Enterprise collector kit. Because even though they put a hole in the model itself, they didn't think to put a hole in the decal where it was going to sit over the hole in the model. So I just let it dry really, really well, and then I took my hobby knife and I just pushed it in there and twisted it a bit to get that decal out of the way so that I could sit this thing on the stand as I worked on it. But there we are. We're happy with the bottom of the saucer now. It looks pretty good, all things considered. Now we're going to get into a little section of our video that I like to call decals that were on the decal sheet that were not in the instructions. I will put in the description a list of the decals that I found on the decal sheet that were not in the instructions so that you don't have to go through the tedium of finding where they go for yourself. I've already done that work for you. You can crib off of my notes. I give you permission. Most of them were fairly low numbers, like A6 and A7 and A5 all go on the top of the saucer here. Again, I really do appreciate the level of detail you can get with these decals. That's really ultimately the frustrating thing about it, because you can get a great level of detail. You can get a great level of detail out of them. But round 2 needs to do a better job of giving you the logistical support you need in order to actually use them effectively. That's me being diplomatic and saying, round 2, why did you send me a model kit that had decals with no instructions attached to them? This is, I believe, decal number A7. I initially thought this might have gone on the lip of the fantail. I'm glad I looked more closely at my Haynes manual. This is why I highly recommend getting something like that as a resource if you're going to build these particular Star Trek models, because upon closer inspection of the dorsal elevation in that book, I realized, oh, there's a little teal along the front of the bridge module there. Gotcha. So that's how we came to that conclusion. It's just using the resources that I have at hand. And then this was a new one to me. I don't remember if this was in the kit that I originally built years and years ago, but this is just a little detail that that goes on top of the impulse housing there at the back of the saucer section. It's a nice little number. I'm glad they included it. I don't actually show it here because this is kind of a highlights reel for you guys, but they actually also included decals for the impulse engines themselves on the back of the saucer, which I thought was a really nice touch that they should have put in the Annex 01 kits as well. But I was glad that they had it here, because it really did add to the level of detail that you get out of this kit. It was a welcome addition. Again, I wish they would have, put the decals in the instructions and told you where they go. That one's one of the more obvious ones, but it's the principle of the thing. So now we're going to go after the top of the saucer section here. And for demonstrative purposes, I did cut this one into wedges, because I wanted y'all to see how the process can work a few different ways. Like I said, if I had to do over again, I probably would have cut the bottom of saucer decal into wedges instead of the top. But it all ended pretty well, and as they say, all's well that ends well. This particular decal lends itself quite nicely to being cut down into wedges because it's got that really handy grid pattern along the whole thing, and so you can just pick a line and cut wherever you feel like cutting. I decided I would cut a wedge that was basically the width of the registry, and then the two other wedges I would just leave as is. I figured for my purposes that'd probably be the easiest way to go. So yeah, I just picked a line and very carefully cut down the line with my hobby knife. If you're not if you're not very confident in your ability to cut a straight line, then I would recommend getting a straight edge, be it a metal ruler or something like that, just something that the hobby knife blade cannot cut through, and then use that to guide your cuts as you make them. My hobby mat is actually really helpful in that regards because if I push really hard, the blade doesn't want to twist. So here we go. First part of the top saucer decal here. And I think, despite the fussing you see in the video, this section went together pretty well, as long as you stay about 3 feet away from my model. If you get any closer than that, you're going to notice I did have a kind of a hard time getting the 3 pieces of the saucer decal to sit snug against each other. So there's a little gap between them. But again, if you're 3 feet away, you really can't see it. And that's really all we're going for there. The 3 feet looks good. We're not trying to win any IPMS model contests or anything like that with these guys. Although theoretically, if you were the only one to register models of this scale in the contest, you might actually win something. But I'm also pretty sure that they just have like an other scale and they lump all of the other scale models together. I don't know. If somebody is more familiar with the IPMS categories than I, feel free to chime in the comments and let us know how they would hypothetically categorize these 2500 scale Star Trek models. I've only ever been to one IPMS model show myself, and I did enter, and I also did not win. I didn't expect to. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I was traveling. It was there. I was like, we'll see what happens. Again, with the Q-tip, just trying to move that decal where I want it to sit. I'm also going to try to get all the creases and bubbles out. Just real gentle. If you're too rough with it, decal's going to slide. And we don't want that once we work so hard to get it put into place. So now I'm happy with that one. We'll move on to wedge number 2, which will sit opposite of wedge number 1. Again, you can see it just pulls right off. Much easier than trying to work with that whole entire saucer section worth of decal. I do apologize for my framing. On top of, being ill last week and still kind of feeling bleh, I was also feeling in the crunch and wanting to get this video done. And I forgot about my blocking. You can see it didn't take me too long to get this decal where I wanted it to sit. Now I'm just trying to get all the wrinkles out. Smooth it out. Just smooth it out real good. Just making sure that it sits real snug against all of the other contours of the model there. I don't necessarily recommend using your fingers most of the time, but again, with these round 2 decals, sometimes they're so thick you can just get away with it, and sometimes they won't move unless you get that aggressive with them. It's really a model by model kind of thing, you know. So just be careful, but figure out what's going to work best for each model. I'm using my microsol now with my brush, and I'm just getting the last of the wrinkles that I can get out of that decal and putting that microsol on there so that it will shrink that decal and get it to conform better to the surface of the model. That was me putting the model off of the bench so that I could cut a decal that I'd already cut. And here we are, putting the very last wedge of that decal on. You can see it's being stubborn. Again, that was kind of the theme of this build. Things have been stubborn, be it the weather or the decals. Trick is just to work straight through it. Don't get discouraged. And once again, I'm out of frame. Yeah, after minimal finagling, I felt pretty happy about that one. Just wanted to make sure that everything was as snug and uniform as possible. I'm using my Q-tip to get the last of those air bubbles out. I would like to point out, since you can kind of see it here, I'm holding the starboard warp nacelle with my thumb. One thing I did notice as I was working on this model is you've got to be really extremely careful with the warp nacelle pylons. In other scales, especially the 350 scale, I have been told that the 350 scale Enterprise refit requires like metal scaffolding, a metal skeletal structure in the warp nacelle assembly, simply because over time they're so thin that the plastic will actually start to bend and sag and droop over time. And that's to say that at 1/2500 scale, those pylons are even thinner and more delicate. So as you're handling this model in particular, be aware of that so that you don't handle it too rough and break a warp pylon off or something. It can definitely happen, and it would make for I think a less than stellar day if you've suddenly found your model build broken because you got a little bit rough. So yeah, just one of those things to bear in mind. Here I am trying to reposition the decal for the impulse engine housing, because as I was fiddling with the saucer decals, I broke it. I thought it had dried and it was good, and it just was not. So I'm like, well, I'll just start from square one. And that's what we did. We started from square one and we fixed it. Once again, sometimes you gotta break it in order to make it. It's funny the things that I will get fixated on, but I knew I could do this one really well. So what you're not seeing off screen is me obsessively trying to get that thing looking as good as I had it before I goofed. Yeah, there we go. Now let's talk a minute about the deflector dish. I am super happy that they have a deflector dish decal, because I didn't want to have to try to paint a decal to have that kind of effect that you get with, or try to paint the deflector dish with that kind of effect you see on the decal. But however, that particular design for the decal is most definitely from the original design of the model kit itself, where the deflector dish area was flat. And so having a full circle decal made a lot of sense. But we're using the revised version of the Enterprise Refit kit, and that version of the deflector dish is concaved. So I did a little bit of sleuthing, and I would like to thank the fine gentleman who runs JT Graphics for letting me steal ideas from his website when it came to how to modify that decal so that it would fit in the model and look good. Because I was looking at his stuff for other model builds and realized, oh, there's a wedge in his decals. I wonder if that's because he's expecting you to use the newer revised version of the 2500 refit kit. So yeah, I snagged a really good idea, shamelessly, but I was also really pleased with the results. So again, if you're doing this particular version of the kit from the 7 Enterprise collector set, be aware that it might help you in putting that saucer or that deflector dish together to cut a wedge. You can see that turned out pretty well for us. I give it a thumbs up. I was really pleased. So now we're going to get into really thick weeds territory. This is our climax, guys. Remember when I said that some of the decals exceeded the limits of what physics and plastic would allow you to do? These did not, but they tried really, really hard to break the limits of what you can do with decals. The warp nacelles in general are very, very intricate in their design and their shape, and round 2 has done what I have to admit is a commendable job at making decals that will cover the entire surface of these warp nacelles. It just makes the application extremely difficult. You can see I went from the front and pulled back on the decal paper. I don't know if that was necessarily the best way to go, because I did it the opposite way on the port nacelle. There is a slit for the little wing that comes off the outside of the nacelle, and I kind of hoped to line that up as I was pulling the decal sheet, or the backing paper off the decal sheet. I don't think I did a great job with that, and honestly, it got kind of hard to reposition that decal after a while, but the results were pretty good. It it looks it looks really intimidating, and yeah, it's kind of intimidating. But it's one of those things. Once again, if you just work slowly and be patient, you can achieve some pretty good results with it. Is it ideal? I don't know that I'd say that. Um, I liked the wallpaper decals from the 2010 set better in a lot of ways because they had the nacelle decals in particular uh, cut down into smaller sizes. It made them easier to work with. The drawback, if I recall, is that either the decals were mislabeled, which is a distinct possibility I've learned as we've been doing this series, or else they were misprinted, and I ended up with one that was backwards. Luckily, it's on the warp nacelle and on the back end of the warp nacelle where not a lot of people are going to look. But I did find that just the slightest bit irksome. However, after quite a bit of finagling, these guys really get the job done pretty good. It's just the finagling. If you're a finagler and you like to finagle, you're gonna have a blast with this kit. I would definitely, if you're following along on the series or you're kind of, tentatively planning on doing uh, these builds for yourself in the future, I would plan on making these later kits that we're getting into now. Kits that you do after you've gotten a little bit of practice under your belt. These are not necessarily slap them together in a weekend kind of kits. They do present some rather unique challenges, and if you want to get them looking exceptionally good, then you're gonna need to excuse me, you're gonna need to get some practice pulling from the front. So I pulled from the back on the other one, pulling from the front, and ta-da! Sometimes the decals just do what they're supposed to do, and that was the case with this one. I was extremely happy that it did what it was supposed to do and didn't really give me a hard time because after the starboard nacelle, I was kind of pooped. I left the warp nacelle decals and the decals that go around the perimeter of the saucer for last because I knew that they would be the most difficult ones for me to do. I'm pleased to say I almost got the edge of the saucer decals applied without them sagging off of the model. So a little bit of sagging on that one. My recommendation there, since this is becoming a regular occurrence, would be to let your model sit uh, upside down, so that there's just less area for gravity to pull the decal off the model. So we're going it with the microsol once again. It's really going to do a lot to help get those decals to sit flat against that model. And with as many different compound curves and contours as there are on those nacelles, you're going to want all the help you can get. Now here's an interesting notion. This is decal number A6, And for the life of me, I could not figure out where on earth this decal was supposed to go. I thought, well, maybe it's supposed to go on the ring around the deflector dish. Nope. Maybe it's supposed to go on the fantail of the shuttle bay. Nope. Finally, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to put it around the bridge dome. And it actually fit pretty well. So I'm thinking that's probably where it was intended to go. But I looked at every legitimate resource I could find on the internet, in my own literature, and I really did not get very much of a hint in that regards. But this worked out pretty well. So this is going to be my official endorsement. If you're building this particular kit, put decal A6 right around the bridge module, up above where you put decal number A7. It works pretty well. I was I was pretty happy with how it turned out. And who knows, maybe someday round 2 will grace us with proper decal application instructions for this model, and we will actually find out where that decal is supposed to go. It'd be great. It'd be awesome. I wasn't sure if the decal had gotten fully flat against the model surface there, but I was trying to keep it lined up on the edges with A7 so that it seemed like the teal was going in a straight line up the hull. Again, I'm not sure if that was the intention, but that's what made sense to me, so that's what I did. And now we're going to do something a little bit different from what we've done in the past. We're going to layer decals. I probably should have done a gloss coat between these steps, but honestly, at this point, I was so close to being done, and the crunch was so real that I was like, okay, I've been here before, and I know how to get this closed. So, just a wee little bit of repositioning there, and everything looks pretty good as long as you're 3 feet away. I was not. I had to make sure it sat as straight and even as I could get it. But now that we finished decals, we're going to do another coat of gloss that's going to seal our decals and make sure they don't go anywhere. I would like to make a special shout out to the Angry Sci-Fi Modeler for reminding me that there is a quicker and more efficient way of spraying my models, especially since I already made the investment in latex rubber gloves. As you can see, that just makes the whole process go a lot more quickly. And now that the gloss coat is dry, I'm going to hit the entire model with a layer of dull coat. That's gonna really deaden that shine and make the model look less like a toy. And actually, I ended up doing two coats of dull because I actually went back and painted a detail on the warp nacelles that I'd forgotten. So let's do some notes. There are a few. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. So, as I mentioned in the previous videos for this series, the actual building process for this kit is surprisingly nice. It went together really nicely. The detail painting, I mean, there's not a whole lot that you need to detail paint on this model, so it's really not going to be too much of an issue. The decals are where the challenge comes into play with this kit. There are a lot of them. They are really hard to work with in a lot of cases, so just take your time. As I mentioned, there are decals that are on the sheet that are not in the instructions. Um, and also, it's worth pointing out that some of the decals are cut a bit big. And I think the reason for that is that there was supposed to be some overlap on various areas of the model. For instance, like the front of the neck and up where the neck joins with the saucer. I noticed there maybe should have been that. But that's something that if you don't figure out beforehand, you might find yourself uh, struggle bussing a little later on. The kit does offer an exceptional amount of detail, and I am truly thankful for that. Chef's kiss there. Uh, but you're gonna have to get cozy with the idea of wrestling with those decals if you're going to get that detail, because that's just the cost of entry. Once again, I have to complain. Why didn't round 2 cut holes in circular decals? I don't know. But if I were them, that's something I would rectify post haste. Um, and I already mentioned this once before, but the warp nacelle pylons are kind of flimsy, so just be careful as you're handling the model that you don't break those. Anyway, that's all I've got for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you'll come back for our next video. And in the meantime, have a great day and happy modeling.